You know, it's they paved it and made it to where you can go the same speed anywhere on the track. And it's makes it some really tough racing, and you don't really have to bump people out of the way to get by them. Sometimes we still do, but.
Welcome to Week 5 of Race Day Preview here at ConcordMonitor.com. I'm Dave D'Onofrio. With me, Gavin Faretra, and that guy you just saw was Carl Edwards, who has been the subject of some talk lately, to say the least. Right there, he's talking about Bristol, this upcoming week's race, and how at this track no longer do you need to bump to get by people. They've regrouped it, and you can drive anywhere on the track. Carl Edwards, though, not interested in not bumping people last week at Atlanta. Gavin, he's on probation now. Is that the right decision? And what was your take on the whole situation with Brad Keselowski?
Well, I think at first it was a long time coming, and I think maybe having this extra week in between races is going to help cool things off a little bit. I think the probation is probably going to keep them from actually getting involved again this week, because Carl does not want to get suspended. He's not having a great start to the year. He's up there right now, but I mean, you got to make sure that you're doing the right things and not get a week off or a couple of weeks of suspension. So I think it was the right thing, though. He did try to get him a couple times in the previous couple laps. He went after him and then finally nicked him and sent him for a good ride. So I think it was warranted. And also I think, Keselowski had to know what was coming. Look at last year with what happened at Talladega. Carl Edwards said all the right things after that happened, saying it was an accident and everything. But I think in the back of his mind, he knew at some point he was going to pay him back, and he chose 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and I think your point about not wanting to be suspended is a good one, because Carl Edwards, by virtue of that race last weekend, fell 10 spots in the standings to 20th. Yeah. He can't afford to miss even one race, because who knows what the standings are going to look like at the end of 26 races. Carl Edwards is a guy who is expected to be in the chase. Sure. Anything short would not satisfy him, his Roush team, his fans, even Ford. And I don't think that any of those components right now can look at him and say, okay, Carl, do what you have to do. It's okay if you get suspended, because that's not the reality here. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, of all the years, you look back the last few years since we've gone to the chase, and there hasn't been a lot of parity with the teams. We do have the same names kind of up there, creeping up there, but we also have some that we haven't expected and haven't seen in the last few years. So if there were ever a year that you want to make sure that you're getting off to a right start, it's this year, because you could fall behind early and not be able to make those points up. Do you think the punishment was appropriate? 3-race probation. It kind of goes along with NASCAR's new have at it boys mindset. But I think that what we're going to see here is a difficulty in balancing that mindset with safety. I mean, Keselowski ended up on his hood, on his roof. Sure. And NASCAR doesn't want to see that, because who knows next time if the guy's going to climb out of the car. Yeah, it's very tough, be a double-edged sword, or however you want to say it. It's one of those things where, yeah, you have at it, but make sure that you're not killing each other out there. So right. I mean, I fully believe that he did not try to spin him around and flip him over. Ended up looking very similar to what happened to Edwards. Not quite as scary, but pretty scary. So it is, eye for an eye there. But I really don't think that's what his intention. I think his intention was Keselowski was still in the race, had a chance at a solid finish, and he just spun him out, trying to get him out of the race, if nothing else. Because Carl was about 196 laps down or something like that. So that's the big thing. I think he saw Keselowski in the top 5. Sure. Saw himself with already a wasted day. Yep. Said, "This is my chance. I can make him pay in the points." Not necessarily by physical violence or ruining his car, but I can make him pay in the points. And he tried to do it, and it just got out of hand. And the scary part is, with cars going this fast, it can get out of hand really easily. And I think that's the part NASCAR, over these next few weeks, months, even seasons, if they continue to go with this philosophy, it's going to be very interesting to see how they monitor themselves. Sure. I mean, maybe have at it will be toned down a little bit, and they'll find some sort of happy medium between what it was and what they are, trying to build it up to be. So I think the probation was the right call, because if you suspend him, Carl can easily say, "Why didn't you do that last year when Keselowski did that to me in the final laps going for first place?" So I think it was the right thing to do, and now he just has to behave himself for the next month. Does this carry over, or does that probation take Edwards out of the mix? I mean, does anything else happen? I don't think so. I really don't. And if anything, that's going to keep, the probation is going to keep anything from happening. And if anything at all looks suspicious, he's gone.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why they wanted to do that, especially coming to a track like Bristol, where even despite what you said about the fact that you can drive around them a little bit easier, there's still going to be some bumping and grinding.
Absolutely. There'll be a lot of metal mashed in this weekend. And I think that's what makes Brad Keselowski a guy to watch. He is not afraid of anybody, not afraid to voice his opinion, not afraid to drive up on anybody. Got into it a little bit with Denny Hamlin last year in the Nationwide pit, and now we see him with Edwards. Not necessarily a guy who's endeared himself to too many on the Sprint Cup circuit, and I think at a track like Bristol, with the attention on him this weekend, it could be a very volatile situation. So he's a guy I'm going to watch. Who are you going to be watching?
Well, I'm going to watch the guy that we used to call. That was the definition of Kyle Busch before.
Yeah.
So that's the guy I'm going to be watching this weekend. You have to go all the way back to August 22nd for his last win. So it's been a long time since this guy has won. But it was at Bristol. He won both times there last year. So if there was going to be a track that he could kind of get out of this funk and take advantage, I think it's this weekend.
Not to say Keselowski doesn't have talent, but I think the difference right now between Busch and Keselowski is certainly driving ability.
Absolutely.
Under the radar now, I think one guy that we've kind of slept on here over the last year and a half, hasn't had a great start to this year, but last year and a half, is Marcus Ambrose. He is the active career leader in driver rating at Bristol, and he's been in the top 10 for 83% of the races he's raced there. Only 2 races, obviously, but this guy, I think, is a guy who could be a factor on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's funny because we talk about under the radar, and you usually come up with a guy like him or a Scott Speed or something like that. I'm going to roll with Jimmy Johnson, and I know that sounds silly, but he's never won here. And I think if we do see a race where there is a lot of bumping, a lot of car mashing, as you said, metal mashing, I think he's the kind of guy that might take advantage because he's not going to probably be involved in that. Kind of sits back, bides his time. So if something like that happens toward the end, he might be the one to take advantage.
So is he on your fantasy list this week?
He's not.
No.
He's not on my fantasy list this week.
Gavin, last week with a 276 to 214 win, I still lead the season standings 1066 to 970. My A-list driver this week, Mark Martin, he has a lot of top 10s there. Obviously, he's run a lot of races there, which helps, but he's got a lot of experience on this track, and I think on the really short half-miler, experience is going to matter. I'm going to go with Ambrose, as I mentioned, and Kevin Harvick on my B-list. Harvick's almost strictly for the fact that he's had a heck of a start to the season, currently leading the points by 26. And on the C list, I'm going with AJ Allmendinger. Not a lot of great options there to choose from.
Yeah, it's always hard to pick that C-list guy. I do have Kyle Busch as kind of my A-list guy, just based on the fact that 3 wins in 10 races, 5 top 5, 7 top 10s, 5.117 average finish. So even if he doesn't win, that's a guy that he's going to get you some solid points from that 8th position. Same B-list guys, Harvick and Ambrose, and I'm going to roll with Paul Menard this week just because he's had a strong start to the season.
Yeah, Paul Menard, he's a guy I'll be watching as well. You don't really think of him as a factor,
sure,
but he's 9th in points right now.
Right.
He's ahead of, right behind him, Kurt Busch, Jeff Gordon, 3 spots back, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kyle Busch behind them. It's Paul Menard's had a good start, and I think if you're going to think fantasy-wise, and you only get 9 starts with them, you might as well use them now.
Yeah, might as well use them now. Ride a guy while they're hot. I mean, so many seasons, that's what happens with C-list guys. I'll do that. I'll have 5 weeks in a row where I'll run the same guy. Doesn't matter what he's done in the past there at that track. You just want to roll with guys while they're hot, and Menard's the guy right now.
As far as winners, I'm not going with Paul Menard. I'll go with the guy you mentioned earlier, 2-time winner there last year, Kyle Busch. I think that this is the week maybe he's been waiting for. Not a great start for the Joe Gibbs guys, but I think that Kyle Busch on this track always has to be considered a factor, and I think this is potentially the week that jumpstarts his season.
Sure, and another guy that wants to jumpstart his season is Jeff Gordon, and I think that's why I'm going to go with him. He is the short track master. You just look, 7 top 5s, 10 top 10s in his last 12 races at tracks similar to this one, and he's a guy that just needs to get that jump start to his season. Similar reason with why I took Johnson as kind of like the under the radar guy this week, given the fact that he hasn't won there very much. Gordon might be one of those guys that he's not as aggressive as he used to be. So I'm looking at him and maybe doing the same thing, sit back, wait for things to kind of happen in front of him, maybe make a push at the end.
Should be fun. Always is at Bristol. For Gavin, I'm Dave. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. Take care.